And what a weekend of college football action we had, not alone in speaking about the games, but we have been inundated with so much college football news that we need to talk about. Zach Arnett out at Mississippi State, Jimbo Fisher out at Texas A&M, more coaches on the hot seat looking at Sam Pittman, and coaches that we thought would be on the hot seat going into the season, looking at Neil Brown, Drinkwitz at Missouri. They're soaring high. Today, we need to break it all down. We need to talk about the games we saw. We need to talk about the news we've seen, and what better way to do it here on a Monday morning at Around the Table Sports. As you're coming in here, hop in, chat. Let me know what you're thinking. We have got so much to get to. I don't even know where we're going to start, but it only feels right to start here. Jimbo Fisher out at Texas A&M. And this is one that really doesn't come as a big surprise to a lot of people. Yesterday, we ran a poll here on the channel asking how many of you were surprised by the Jimbo Fisher news, and it was widely accepted that people weren't surprised by this. Many people anticipated that this would be happening, as was shown by the poll. I think it was something like 86% of people weren't surprised by Jimbo Fisher getting fired. Now, the reason why I asked that in the poll yesterday is because the massive buyout Jimbo Fisher had. And at the point where they had extended Jimbo Fisher, why would they fire him for giving them the same results that they have said time and time again that they were going to accept? That's why I'm caught in between a rock and a hard place with this Jimbo Fisher news. I am not surprised that they got rid of Jimbo Fisher because it was obviously not working. Jimbo Fisher has been able to recruit really well for Texas A&M. That's not the issue, but he effectively is Kevin Sumlin light. He was giving you less wins than Kevin Sumlin got you. He was giving you less ranked wins than Kevin Sumlin got you, less road ranked wins than Kevin Sumlin got you, more losses than Kevin Sumlin got you, and more losses to group of 5 teams than Kevin Sumlin got you. And when I would bring this up, I would have a lot of Aggie fans coming in and saying, well, we don't disagree. He recruits better. And I would sit there and think to myself that that's not a winning argument. Essentially, what you're telling me is we're having Kevin Sumlin light, we're paying him more for worse results, and he's doing it with better talent. That didn't sit right with me. And I think after a while, it didn't sit right with Texas A&M either. So I completely understand the position of looking at Jimbo Fisher and getting rid of him. But now let me tell you the other side of this sword. Now let me explain to you why part of me is conflicted. Part of me is a little bit surprised they made this move. It's because all Texas A&M has shown us is that they are fine with the standard that Jimbo Fisher has presented. When they extended Jimbo Fisher, I asked the question, what is the standard of acceptability at Texas A&M? Because you fired Kevin Sumlin for exactly what Jimbo Fisher is giving you. Not only did you fire Kevin Sumlin for Jimbo Fisher, see the results he gave you, you then saw those results and said, yes, we are going to extend you off of one really good year. And now we must ask the question, was that one really good year? Was that really what a Jimbo Fisher Aggie team looks like? Or was that a statistical anomaly? Now, I'm not a scientist, but I did graduate with a political science degree, which is next to meaningless, right? Next to meaningless. But what it does allow me to do is look at the situation and say, this doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense, which always came to the question for me, what is the standard of acceptability at Texas A&M? Because by extending Jimbo and paying him like he's Kirby and paying him like he's Nick, you're saying that 8-4 is perfectly fine here. But Kirby and Nick don't get paid for 8-4. Kirby and Nick get paid to win big games, and they do. And the only reason I'm bringing Kirby and Nick into this equation is because Texas A&M decided to go out and pay Jimbo like he was Kirby, like he was Nick. He was being paid as if he was in that same tier, and he's not. And I know for someone first coming in here, they might come into this stream and say, wow, this guy does not care for Jimbo Fisher. And please understand, that's not it at all. I am perplexed by the way in which Texas A&M has handled this whole thing. I am halfway perplexed they fired him because you have been telling everybody through your actions that what you have gotten through Jimbo Fisher is not only acceptable, it is to be rewarded in the form of a massive coaching extension and pay raise. And so when I see Texas A&M be given Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M results and then saying not good enough, my question is, when did it become not good enough, Texas A&M? At what point did it not become good enough? Because this is largely the same Jimbo Fisher that you extended. So at what point during this experiment did you look and say, this isn't good enough? Because I have to know. Understand, this is a meaningless question. Nothing that information would give us would change anything about this situation. But I have to know. Why now? And also understand, I'm not questioning whether it was the right or wrong move. If you ask me, this was the right move. But I'm also not Texas A&M. I wouldn't have extended Jimbo Fisher. Once again, if this sounds like I'm hating on Jimbo Fisher, please understand I'm not. I err on the side of results. You show me results, I give you leeway. Simple as. If they made Kirby Smart the highest paid coach in America by 3 times, you wouldn't hear me say a peep. Because results. What am I going to say? What are they, 28 unbeaten in a row now? What are you going to say to that? That's results. If Nick Saban gets extended, what are you going to say? That's results. A team that everybody counted for dead and is now staring the college football playoffs in the face. That's results. So this whole scenario, Jimbo Fisher, Texas A&M, it has confused me the entire time. I do think Texas A&M made the right move. But now we get to the real question, what comes next? Because there is an unfortunate reality if you're a Texas A&M fan, and that's that you have assembled an incredible roster. You have assembled a roster that rivals the best of them in college football. Now, that being said, I wouldn't take A&M's roster toe-to-toe with an Alabama's or a Georgia's, but I will say you look at certain areas of that Texas A&M roster, and they feel like they can stack up with the best of them. Right? Whether if you had 5 people and you all had to pick a defensive line unit, the person who drew the Texas A&M stick isn't going to be mad about drawing that stick when they look at the talent on that defensive line. That's what I'm trying to say here. Now, while that's great, new rules in college football also dictate that in situations like this where Jimbo Fisher has now been fired, that this team has a 30-day window to hit the transfer portal. And you can bet your bottom dollar that all of these teams around the nation are looking at College Station, licking their chops. Because they know A&M has got to handle this and handle this quickly. And that's what makes this a little bit more interesting. And I'm interested in hearing from all of you. Because traditionally, you could fire a coach, hire an interim coach, and say, okay, we need to get this figured out sooner rather than later for recruiting. But we have a little bit of time. Now time goes out the window. You have a bunch of players on roster that need a plan. And if they're not told this is your future, this is your head coach, what keeps them there? I'm not asking a loaded question, by the way. This is a genuine question. This is not me asking a loaded question, a question where an answer is behind it. These are genuine questions. This is open discussion now. What keeps them there? Jimbo Fisher isn't there. He was a major selling point, and now what was already a team that was shrouded in chaos with your leader, now chaos is rampant. What keeps you there? What keeps you there when you look and you see Texas really trending in a positive direction? You see Brent Venables in Oklahoma doing great work on the trail and recruiting and on the football field. You see the Oklahoma Sooners growing. You see Alabama, who has been a standard of what college football teams should look like for the past decade or more. I mean, goodness gracious, at this point, we're going on 2 decades. We are 6 years away from 2 decades of the Nick Saban Alabama run. Think about that. For 2 decades almost, that's been the standard. You look at Georgia, that's a factory. You look at Ohio State, once again, a factory. Clemson, I have my complaints about Dabo Swinney. I have my complaints about his unwillingness to adapt. They're still sending cats to the league. I think that things need to change there, but point being, what keeps you there at Texas A&M? If you look around the nation and you see Alabama, who just throws players into the NFL draft every year, they just gather up an armful and toss them into the NFL draft. So does Georgia. What keeps you there when Texas is there and they're surging? They're trending in a positive direction. They're going to the SEC. What keeps you there whenever you chose between Oklahoma and A&M? You ended up choosing A&M, and now you look and Todd Bates has got that defensive line trending in a positive direction. Brent Venables recruiting well. Defense is growing, a very difficult defense to come in and instantly take on. What keeps you there? I bring all this to your attention because in all of this, ladies and gentlemen, we have something a little bit unique. We are seeing the rampant changes of college football and how you have got to manage a roster. Texas A&M just fired a head coach, and now they have to present answers to this roster quickly. Because if they don't present answers quickly, do you know who will? Nick Saban. Do you know who will? Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney, Brent Venables, Lincoln Riley. Even teams that you have questions about, if they have a head coach, they are already further ahead. Now, that's not saying they're further ahead for long. Texas A&M could make a great hire, and I will take back that take tomorrow. Understand, that is a take that is active as long as Texas A&M does not have direction. But point being, there is a 30-day window now in which players can transfer out, and Texas A&M historically could take this into the offseason, take this into January and say, that's where we'll make our hire. That's where we'll make our hire. I don't know that they have that anymore. You have got to present answers and present them real quick now. And understand, Texas A&M wouldn't be in the position if they were if they didn't have all those great recruiting classes. And I would argue they would have booted Jimbo sooner if they didn't have all those recruiting classes that they'd stacked. I think that the Texas A&M decision makers are very aware about the implications of the transfer portal and what it could mean. So what do you do if you're Texas A&M? These players have a 30-day window right now to transfer. But unfortunately for Texas A&M, guess what happens? They have a 30-day window right now, and at the end of this 30-day window, guess what opens up for everybody in college football? That's right, the transfer portal window. And so some of these Texas A&M players have up to 60 days almost to start making decisions. If you're Texas A&M, it's time to start making decisions, and it's time to make them quickly. One would assume that you wouldn't fire Jimbo mid-year unless you had a direction in mind. But one would also assume you don't make Jimbo Fisher one of the highest paid coaches in the nation for 8-4. And yet that assumption went out the window. So who am I to pretend to have any sort of clarity on the assumptions Texas A&M will make? Let's hit some comments. Already lost a wide receiver to the portal. I saw that, Lucian. That's, and it's not going to be the only one. It's not. Arnett is out. Yep. That's, and listen, I like Arnett, Steven, but when you come in to that situation, there's one thing that never sat right with me. It never sat right with me at all. And I never really talked about it. I should have. That was a mistake by me, but you live and you learn. And I certainly learned. I should have talked about this. Not that I could do anything about it. Not that my opinion matters in the slightest. It doesn't. But I hated how Arnett came in there and treated the staff Mike Leach already had. I understand it is now your team and you need to do what you believe is best. And if you believe it's best to get your guys in there, that's what's best, right? Whether it works out or not, if you are now the leader of something, you have got to go all in. You've got to give it your best. And if you think that your guys are going to give you the best opportunity to win, do it. But do it with professionalism. Do it with dignity, especially in the way in which Mike Leach left us. Rest in peace. To a major figure in college football. That never sat right with me. Arnett's a hell of a coach. I think he's going to make a hell of a defensive coordinator. I mean, if you're LSU right now, what stops you from calling Zach Arnett? Brian House, I mean, the House defensive coordinator situation, that's not working. What stops you from calling Arnett? And that's something I'm looking at very closely, Stephen. Arnett and LSU, because if I was LSU, I'd be making that call last night. I'm surprised by the timing, and that's about it. I can understand that. Lucian says, what's up, Ty? Whoa. When you don't produce wins or have the progression in... Yep. And he got paid. It won't even matter. Yeah, you're right, Charles. So the bottom line is, do they even know what that level is? 8-4 is a Big Ten success. Yeah, this is an interesting question, Lucian, and I think this is something we can take about 2 minutes and discuss, because this is a great question, and it leads into a larger discussion that's happening on Twitter right now, because y'all know there's one college football analyst whose takes I basically put in the Louvre, right? Like, if you're asking me who I think the best person in the sport industry is, I think it's Josh Pate. I don't think it's relatively close either. Like, I have a ton of appreciation for like a Stephen A. Smith in terms of his ability to get views, in terms of his ability to be such a major person in the industry, what he meant for the industry, what he and Skip Bayless meant for sport debate. Massive in terms of the history of this industry that I'm trying to break into. But Josh Pate is who I consider to be the gold standard. And he has a take right now that is going wild on Twitter, because you have the people who agree and the people who disagree, and that's that he's saying Texas A&M is a premier job. Now, you have a bunch of people disagreeing with that take, saying, but they've never won anything, and his point is, but they have the resources. I find myself more on the side that it isn't a premier job, but I also completely understand his point, because we can argue money doesn't fix everything, but money fixes a lot. And yes, even though they haven't done it, money allows you to be wrong more often than you're right. And that's the point that I do agree with Josh about. Now, that being said, I don't think that premier comes from nowhere. You have to earn premier. I understand that they have the capabilities. I think where I disagree with Josh is purely in the language, and this is going to make some of you sigh, but this is the debater in me. This is the philosopher in me, right? I disagree purely on the language and the premise. I would agree if the take was Texas A&M has the capabilities to be a premier job. Sure, 100%. They have the capital, they have the resources, they have the buy-in from the decision makers, they have all of the weight rooms, everything you could win, all the technology, everything. But just because you have the capability to be premier does not make you premier. Right? Like, that's just the simple truth of it. For many years, the San Antonio Spurs dominated. They were a small market team. The Los Angeles Lakers, unbelievable. The New York Knicks, massive brands. The Knicks have the capability to be that premier. But capability does not equal reality. So I understand what Josh is saying, but I would differentiate the language in order for me to fully agree with the take. To be capable does not mean to be. This goes back to, I believe it was either Aristotle or Socrates. This doesn't matter. The argument of big truth, the big T truth versus little t truth, where one is an absolute and the other is a matter of framing and point of view. A&M has the capabilities of being a premier job, but they are not a premier job. I think that's an interesting distinction to make, Lucian. I love that question because I love the discussion it gets us into. And y'all got to remember, I come from the philosophy, law, debate background. So anytime I can start getting philosophical, it's part of the reason why I love breaking down film so much, is because you could get surprisingly analytical, just really thoughtful. If you get top-level talent and the results don't match, you have a problem. Look at Bama's defense with the right coach. The talent wasn't the issue the last 4 years. Jim, my man, that gets a star. That is a great take. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a fantastic take, and it's one we need to understand. There are coaches that know how to maximize the talent they do have. And then there are coaches that know how to coach talent. Now, you can be all of those things, but rarely are you all of those things. Usually you're one of those things. I love this. And now we see that talent was not an issue. Eric, happy you're in here, man. Happy you're in here. Is a voodoo witch when he comes. Yes. Hey, Elijah Robinson's that dude. He's that dude. For real. That's why, Steven, anytime we talk Texas A&M, anytime I would be like, hey, I know everybody, but they have a guy out there. They have one guy on that staff that, like, I do put faith in, and it's him. It is E-Rob. It is E-Rob. Already lost a wide receiver to the portal. Yeah. McKinley and Busey to OU. That'd be wild. The showing by Saron Moore was absolutely pathetic. That was a little odd, but, you know, I'm also not him. I don't know their relationship. That's not on me to speak of, but I did think it was a little odd. Good morning, folks. Chicken, glad you're in here. Jance, my man, happy you're in here. It's about to be fishing season in the portal. It absolutely is. Walter, Nolan, Evan Stewart, it's time to come to T-Town. Do not forget about Moose Muhammad, who Nick Saban coached, whose dad, Muhsin Muhammad, at Michigan State. Moose, come on down. You are a Crimson Tide. Wonder how many schools got, man, everybody. Mark Stoops to A&M. That'd be interesting. But I also think to A&M's point, PG, we're looking at like Elko. We're looking at a Jeff Traylor. If they could swing a Kyle Whittingham. Now, I don't think he leaves Utah. I say that, but money makes the world go round, man. Like that's a truth that we all have to accept. If you can get Kyle Whittingham, y'all know how much I regard him. I think he is a fantastic coach. I think he is a huge coach. Josh Pate is more trustworthy than Feinbaum. I agree. That's true for both sides of the ball, I think. Yeah. I don't disagree, PG. I don't disagree, but I don't know that A&M will want to do that. Because you're caught in a really interesting position if you're A&M. Do you go make the sexy hire, which is going to cost you a lot of money? Or do you go out and try and get a name that can save you some money? That's the part that's going to be so interesting. It is a safe hire. I agree. But I also think Elko would be big. He's familiar with Texas A&M. He knows the system. He knows some of those players. In fact, if I'm trying to keep a lot of those players, I think Elko is a name that you might try and pull the trigger on. You know what, Steven? You're 100% right. You're 100% right. And I'm not even trying to make a joke here. I'm not trying to be facetious. Until A&M shows me you're right. You are 100% right, Steven. And I'm not even trying to be facetious. This is true. PG, you're 100% right. Like, these are logical takes, but Texas A&M, they're almost backed into a corner of having to do something slightly illogical. And in that, it will make sense. It's fascinating. It's going to be amazing. Lincoln Riley to A&M. I don't believe that. I don't think that they would do that, Justice. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that they would put out a feeler. Sure. But well, you know what? Let's go ahead and get into that. Let's go ahead and get into this. USC versus Oregon. Now, I picked this game on the Bleacher Report app, by the way. Every Friday, we get together on the Bleacher Report app on the college football section, and we do a college football pick'em show. I am currently in the lead. I do not plan on looking back. Coming out of last weekend, of the 94 games we'd picked, I was 75 correct, 19 incorrect. A few teams let me down this weekend. I'm looking at you, Kansas. I'm looking at you, Tennessee. Both of them let me down, but that's neither here nor there. Going to keep on going. But we picked this game, Oregon, USC. And I picked Oregon. It didn't take me much to think about. I picked Oregon because Oregon's been the better team. Let's call it what it is, right? Oregon's been the better team. Even if USC offensively was still USC offensively from last year, I would have picked Oregon because Oregon's got a better defense. And I will always be comfortable being wrong, betting on the more complete team. I will bet on the more complete team pretty much well every time. But I thought Oregon, more complete, they're just going to take USC to the woodshed. And in some ways they did. But this gets me back to a question, ladies and gentlemen, that I asked last week before that game. And that's, you fired Alex Grinch. That's step one. But is that going to be causal and effect, right? Like what I'm saying is, will Alex Grinch being gone cause the effect of the defense turning around and all of a sudden USC being the team they need to be? I don't think the answer is yes. Because even though Alex Grinch was a problem, he certainly wasn't the correct defensive coordinator. He has not put together a defense that has succeeded in a decade at multiple different stops through a large sample size. There are other things wrong. I look at USC right now, and there's a glaring issue. It'd be one thing if you were a physical team that just wasn't playing well, right? Like you're a physical team, but you're losing games. Like Auburn. Auburn might be losing games, but they're standing 10 toes in a lot of these games. I mean, they're trying to take it to you. They're playing with a nasty intent. You might be beating up on Auburn. LSU ran the score up on them. But Auburn is playing as a far more physical unit than is USC. And that's a big deal. I know that might sound like an arbitrary distinction. And I would easily excuse anybody who told me, but Ty, that's an arbitrary distinction. Come on. Just physicality. We're talking football. That'd be like if we were talking boxing and you said there's one guy who he'll fight and then there's another guy who you got to drag him out of the ring. He wants to fight. When that bell ends, you got to drag him out and he's sprinting to the octagon, to the ring, because he can't wait to get in there. I'm probably going to pick the guy that you got to get dragged out of the ring because he wants to fight. He's got that heart. That's like Auburn right now. Auburn and USC. You have a team that can fight versus a team that wants to fight. I bring that to your attention because as much as Alex Grinch was a problem, there are a series of problems that USC has got to solve. First and foremost is strength and conditioning. They are getting out physicaled by everybody. Anybody and everybody, and that is not going to be a winning recipe. It's not a winning recipe in the Pac-12. You can bet your sweet bippy it's not going to be a recipe in the Big Ten. I will grant you this. I think the offenses, by and large, in the Big Ten are horrific. They are god-awful. That's the worst offensive group in the nation. Not counting some teams, right? Like Maryland, every now and then will turn it on offensively. I'm not sure where Maryland ranks this year, so that might be a terrible example, but just know that the Mike Locksley offense can score quickly. They got Raheem Jarrett. They got some talented wide receivers. They got Tualia back there. They just have no defense, and they have no consistency. Ohio State has the capabilities of being a strong offense, but by and large, offense in the Big Ten just isn't that great. It's not. That's why Penn State has lost 2 games and they just fired their offensive coordinator midseason. You don't do that if your offensive coordinator is good. So offenses in the Big Ten just haven't been that great. So Lincoln Riley will walk into the Big Ten with one of the best offenses, but ladies and gentlemen, do you know it's littered in the Big Ten? Oh my God, do they play defense? Now, I know that there is a question of, Ty, is it great defense or is it because they're playing poor offenses? I think sometimes the answer is the latter, but I think in some of your teams, Ohio State, Michigan, they're pretty good, right? Like they're going to be playing a pretty good level of defense. That's not even to say that you're going to win a national championship. That's just to acknowledge you're one of the more competitive teams in the nation. So Lincoln Riley, USC, going to the Big Ten, they will not have Caleb Williams. He will now have to find a new defensive coordinator and completely restructure his team in a manner that actually respects defense, which has not happened. So that's going to be a change. It's not just as simple as bringing in a defensive coordinator and saying, there it is. You have got to fundamentally change the way you view the game, which he can certainly do. Lincoln's a bright guy. I mean, you don't get to be that successful as a head coach as an offensive mind not being bright. So he can do that. That's not the But then you got to change your strength and conditioning program because that's not working. You are losing the battle of physicality every time. You're losing it in the Pac. You were losing it in the Big 12. Do you remember what happened when they played Alabama in the college football playoffs? Do you remember how that first series went? Bama was ragdolling them. Why? Because a Lincoln Riley coach team was not physical. You had cats from Bama busting through that offensive line, coached by one of the best offensive line coaches in the nation, grabbing Kyler Murray with one hand and just tossing him. Because there was not a battle of physicality. That was never a question. You had who could and who could not. And Lincoln Riley had a fantastic team. That team was littered with talent. There's a reason why they ended up being able to score some points. They were able to move the ball because Kyler was unbelievable. The wide receivers were unbelievable. The offensive line was very talented, but they weren't being put in a position to ever maximize their ability because they were coming to an arena already day dot losing the battle of physicality. And we see that at USC. He has Caleb Williams. He's got all this talent. They are walking into buildings day dot, losing the battle of physicality. We can talk about Brent Venables. You can talk about Brent Venables this year, maybe dropping a game or two that he shouldn't have. They're not getting their butts kicked in the battle of physicality. That's not happening anymore. There is growth that needs to happen at OU, but you are seeing a total difference in the way they respect defense. That's looking more like the early 2000s. It's looking more like the 90s. Respecting the defensive side of the football. Respecting that football is a physical game. I've defended Lincoln Riley. OU fans, you'll know. I have certainly had my complaints with the way he went about things, but in terms of talking about him as a football coach, I've defended Lincoln Riley. But there comes to be a certain point where some truths are just so self-evident that you cannot ignore them. And this is one of them. I will ask you this. I will ask everybody in the chat this. Because I believe if Lincoln Riley figures it out, he will be dangerous in the Big Ten. If they can figure out the physicality, if they can figure out the strength and conditioning, if he can get a defensive coordinator, if he can get to play a complementary style of football, offense, defense, they're going to be so dangerous. So dangerous. That's a lot that has to happen. And I ask all of you this. What other head coach will have lost playoff games with the following quarterbacks and have as much leeway as Lincoln Riley? Lincoln Riley had Caleb Williams, Spencer Rattler, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield, and 0 playoff wins to show for it. Once again, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Spencer Rattler, and Caleb Williams, and 0 playoff wins to show for it. The reason I bring that to your attention, this fires me up a little bit, and I am going to show my bias a little bit here. For those of you that may not be familiar with the channel, I grew up an Alabama fan. I own that, even though I do general college football content so that everybody is understanding. If I say something you may not agree with, maybe there is an innate bias, but I want you to know that. That way there is a understanding. This is a relationship in which you can respect where I'm coming from because I'm going to respect you enough to let you know where my biases may lie. Someone said you could have kept Rattler off that list. Look what he's doing right now, Private. His draft stock is flying right now. No, I'm not saying he's a first-round quarterback, Private. No doubt about it. But he's playing better with Shane Beamer with worse wide receivers, worse offensive linemen, worse scheme, and worse running back play. And he's playing way better. It's the truth. He's playing better than he played for Lincoln. Fair enough, Private. Fair enough. Fair enough. But, yeah, I'll get to that, Anthony. I'll get to that. Here's why I told you all about my bias. Last season, Alabama didn't make the college football playoff. I had to hear about Nick Saban's legacy being tarnished for not making a college football playoff game. in a year where Alabama lost 2 games by a combined 4 points. 2 games, 4 points. Both losses came at the last second of the game. Now, I'll be the first to admit, with the talent Alabama had last year, I think a lot of people expected them to win the national championship. And yes, it was a little bit disappointing because they didn't even make a playoff game. But to say that Nick Saban's legacy was tarnished over not making a college football playoff game to me was wild. What other head coach in the nation has been given the leeway that Lincoln Riley has, in the sense of he has 0 playoff wins with Caleb Williams, Spencer Rattler, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts? I heard Nick Saban's legacy was ruined from 2 losses. But what other coach gets the leeway of those 5 names, and 0 playoff wins for it? People tried to question Kirby before the run he's on, and Kirby was giving you beautiful results. To the observant eye, to the people that knew what was happening, you saw what was happening at Georgia with Kirby, and you were like, okay, that's brewing. Before they ever won their first one, I'm saying you can go back all the way to before they ever did any of that. It was brewing. You saw it. It was obvious. People tried to question Kirby. I like Lincoln Riley. I think he's a good head coach, but he has gotten a lot of leeway where other coaches have been really crucified for their results. And it's something I do find interesting. Let's hit some comments. Anthony, I'm going to start with this one. Ty, do you think Mike Elko will ever leave Duke? Maybe if Lincoln Riley offers him a lot of money to be his defensive coordinator at USC. Anthony, I would watch A&M for Mike Elko right now. If I was you, I'd be watching Mike Elko to Texas A&M. Right? I think that's the one. Ty, who are your top 10 replacements for Jimbo Fisher or Texas A&M, and are they mainly defensive first coaches or offensive first coaches? I'm privy to the defensive side of the ball, Anthony. We've talked about this before. I grew up, my favorite position, because, and you play Pee-wee football, growing up, middle school, all that. I ended up having several surgeries in high school that kept me from playing. But going into that, I always loved playing linebacker, all this, that, the other, right? I just love defense. One of my best friends who played, he was cornerback. Actually, one of the best man at my wedding played cornerback in college. Another one of my really good friends, Denzel, played safety for TCU and ended up going on to the NFL. I have a buddy, David, who plays wide receiver in the league, has played for multiple teams. So if you're wondering, even though I didn't play, how I know about football, it's that. I've been surrounded by college players. And even then, I've just been surrounded by college players, and I've just picked their brain. And I love the defensive side of the ball, especially getting to talk to Denzel, who played for Gary Patterson. Oh, talking to him is just a wealth of knowledge. He was coached by Gary Patterson, and he was a safety. You're talking about one of the premier secondary coaches of our generation, and he played for him. He was Gary Patterson's dude. While Denzel was at TCU, he was a mainstay in that defense. So getting Denzel breaking down film for me, talking to him, yeah, man, I would go defense, but I'm also so biased. I'm so biased in that. But Elko. I like Elko a lot. Savage Dog says UGA and Bama, 2 best teams in the country, hands down. Listen, right now they're playing unbelievable. I said this a few weeks ago, Savage. I thought, and Georgia isn't getting the credit for it, and I understand why. But I thought that Georgia, the way y'all beat Florida, now granted, it didn't look good when then Florida lost the way they did moving forward, but I was just really impressed with that win for the following reason. Auburn played Georgia really close, even with Brock Bowers. And Georgia was very reliant on Brock Bowers. And they've been reliant on Brock Bowers all year. And it's almost like Georgia, who's so talented, was using Brock Bowers as a little bit of a crutch, right? Going through the year where they were beating people, but they were like, okay, well, we don't really worry. We got Brock Bowers. The second he went down, it's almost like they were like, okay, now we have to walk without a crutch. And then they just almost did like those movies, right? Where they whip open the giant coat and you see how many weapons they really have. That's what Georgia looked like to me when Brock Bowers went down, where you were the guy in the movie walking around with the crutch, still a badass going through it. But then the second they kicked away your cane and you had to go away from that, you ripped open the jacket and you're armed to the teeth. And people forgot that you're armed to the teeth. Georgia is scary. I know people, they're scary, guys, and they woke up. Georgia has awakened. They're here. They're pissed. They're here. The SEC championship game, Savage, is going to be so much fun because, let's be honest, in terms of like matchmaking, it's like a mirror. You know what I mean? Like the offenses are going to differentiate a little bit, sure, but the defenses are mirrors, and it's just going to be beautiful. It's going to be so fun, Savage. I can't wait. I cannot wait for that game. College football, I mean, we're essentially getting a fifth playoff game in the SEC championship. Now, that's not relegated to that. If Oregon and Washington keep winning, we're going to get a sixth playoff game in the Pac-12 championship. So, yeah. No, I agree, Savage. I agree. Right now, they're playing unbelievable football. Really good. Anthony says Ryan Day. Ryan Day has playoff wins, though, Anthony. Ryan Day competed in a national championship. I do understand what you're saying. I do get what you're saying. But now think of it like this, Anthony. We have people on Ryan Day riding him, saying he's overrated, but he made a national championship game. Lincoln Riley doesn't have a college football playoff win with Baker Mayfield, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams, and Spencer Rattler. I don't disagree. I think that if you are going to argue it, Anthony, Ryan Day is a good name to throw out there. But I also think we've got to remember he made a national championship. He made it there. And that does separate him. Miles said, screenshot this. College football, 1, Oklahoma State, 2, Florida State, 3, Texas, 4, Bama. Well, what about Washington? What about Washington, Miles? They're coming off of the win against Utah, undefeated. Yeah, you gotta be. Gotta be. Stealing this from PG earlier, but there's a bunch of people here. Ty, do you know what Jimbo should be buying and celebrating with Shady Mile? I know Jimbo should be loading up on the Shady Mile. By the way, guys, Shady Mile, Steven, I love you, man. You're the best. Shady Mile, ladies and gentlemen, sponsor of the show, sponsor of the channel, and they are fantastic. As you can see, every week that goes by, the Shady Mile is getting a little bit lower. The Shady Mile Rye still here because we got into the Shady Mile wheat this weekend. As you know, we love the UFC around here as well. Boxing, any sort of combat sport, Glory, One, UFC, boxing, we're here watching it. So this weekend, friends came over, enjoyed the games. Well, friends didn't come over. We went over, enjoyed the games, enjoyed some UFC. Came back yesterday. Great time. But a special thank you to Shady Mile. I really think they have a great product, guys, especially at a great price point. And that's what matters to me. Whenever I was looking at sponsorships and everything, it mattered to me to work with a company that valued their consumers. And Shady Mile does that. They're one of the oldest distilleries in the state of Kentucky. They're synonymous with Kentucky bourbon, Kentucky whiskey. And even though they have that rich history, instead of driving the price up, they're trying to figure out how they can get the best product to you for the best price. And I have a lot of respect for that. And that's why I'm very proud to be working with Shady Mile. Anytime I work with a company, my first thought is, are they giving the best product available to you guys? If I'm going to work with them, they have got to give something that I'm going to stand behind. I stand behind Shady Mile. I love what they do. Thank you very much, Stephen, for keeping me honest. You're the best. I need to give you a little gold star. Savage says, going to be a great game. I'll be pulling for the SEC champs no matter who wins it. Savage, I can't tell you how excited I am for that game. Now, don't get me wrong. Bama's got to get through Auburn. Auburn's playing really well right now, and I don't have to tell you, Savage. Texas and Oklahoma fans in here, you'll learn. You'll learn real soon. Jordan-Hare's cursed. That stadium is cursed. It is real tough to get wins in that stadium for whatever reason. I don't know. Savage, you can speak to this too, because I know everybody always says, me as an Alabama fan, they're like, oh, you're just, y'all are Auburn's rival. It just happens. You're right. You're not wrong. You're certainly not wrong. But Savage, you're a Georgia fan, and I even know you will shudder to think some of those Auburn teams, what happened in Jordan-Hare. Stadium's cursed. Stadium is absolutely cursed. So Bama's got to get through them first. I have them winning, but it's going to be a game. Would Mario Cristobal at Oregon fit that criteria you're talking about? He'd be close, Anthony. He'd be close. I think he'd be very close. That's not a bad one. I don't think that he ever had that level, right? Like Mario Cristobal may have had more complete. I don't know, though. I don't know. Even then, Anthony, like Lincoln, and I think he's a good coach, but he has gotten so much leeway that I don't think other coaches would have been granted. In fact, I bring you the example of Nick Saban being dragged by Paul Feinbaum for 2 losses. Meanwhile, see if you can. Neo, listen here. If Brahms was a sponsor, I would be obese. That'd be problematic. I couldn't help myself. We all know why someone was fired, why Jimbo was given more. Marcus, I know what you mean, and that's why I always bring up that comparison, because that needs to be heard. I always bring up what they did at Texas A&M and ask the question, what's the standard? I frame the argument like that very purposefully, and you see it. But I frame my argument on Texas A&M very purposefully, because I'm asking, what's the difference? What's the standard of acceptability? Kevin Sumlin gave you more wins, more road-ranked wins, more just success, and you fired him. Jimbo Fisher has given you less than that, better talent, and you paid him. What are the differences? What's that old phrase about the unmutterable? Let the unmutterable remain unmutterable. I forget the exact phrase, but you get the basic principle I'm speaking on, Marcus. I 100% agree. Anthony, that's all in the contract lingo. Yeah. Speaking of, Robert, thank you very much. Guys, I want to take a little bit of a time to thank all of you. We hit 20,000 subscribers on the channel this weekend, and that is something I never believed we would get. I made this channel because I graduated college, was working in law firms, was in a really bad place, and realized I didn't know if law was for me, and I needed to do a pivot. The pandemic hit, and I didn't know what to do. I managed to get an internship, and at that internship, they told me, hey, just make a YouTube channel, try and get a reel going so that way you can gain some attention. And it ended up turning into this. What was supposed to be me just uploading videos so that I could then chop them up and send them out and around ended up being this, where now we have a platform to talk about college football. And none of that's possible without you guys. Every single one of you coming in, especially the guys in here, the gals in here during this live stream. One of the things that I think separates my show, and there's a lot of great college football shows out there, but I pride myself in remaining interactive with you guys. Through the Haze was started because it was supposed to be a more structured live stream than my Monday evening live streams, because my Monday evening live streams are just simply like almost pure interaction where we just interact with you guys. And even though this is a more structured stream, we still have about 15 minutes of an hour-long show. 15 to 20 minutes of our show is still pure interaction. And that's what makes this show unique. That's what makes this different, is that this isn't an analyst talking to you. This is a group of people talking college football. I'm no different than any one of you. We are just a group of people talking college football. What I want this channel to feel like is that we are all at Waffle House or one of those diners on a Saturday morning, a Sunday morning, talking ball before the game. That's what this is meant to feel like. And you guys have cultivated that community. It's little to do with me. The growth a YouTuber experience is always very little to do with them and very much to do with the audience that accepts what they're trying to do, sees what they're trying to do, and gets behind what they're trying to do. And I can't thank you all enough because I never thought for 1 second we'd be in the position where we are here, where it's 20,000 subscribers. Y'all will know every so often we'll be in here, and genuine names in the industry are in here watching as well. It's not uncommon at all for us to be in here talking on a day and Hayes Fawcett to pull up and start chopping it up, talking recruiting with us. He'll pull up in the chat. You guys did that. We've been able to cultivate something that people, even people in the industry, find unique, and they do tune in. And that's all on you guys. So thank you so much. I really don't know what else to say. It means more than I think I could ever express to all of you. The opportunity you've given me, because it's truly an opportunity you've given me, and it does mean a lot. So thank you so much for all of that. Let's hit some comments, and then we got to talk about the transfer portal, because my goodness, definitely one of the hardest stadiums to play in. Yeah, it's cursed. It's ridiculous. For me, is Jordan Hare, the Big House, Happy Valley, Orange, and Camp Rand. Yeah, definitely a good mix of interaction and great content. Thank you so much, Savage. Injury news coming out of Texas. Yeah, we got to talk about that, Steven. Texas, unfortunately, has a really bad injury they've sustained. Jonathan Brooks goes down with an ACL injury. I have no idea what that means for his future, and it sucks. Like that one really affected me. And I'm going to tell y'all exactly why. And this kind of goes into what we just came about. I don't mean to make this sappy, but Jonathan Brooks is one of those guys where when I got that internship where I didn't know what I was going to be doing, Jonathan Brooks was in high school. I remember watching him in the state game. I remember talking to him, getting a little bit of an interview for him for Dave Campbell's. I talked to his cousin, Dalton Brooks, Doug Brooks, like the Brooks family. They were unbelievable. So kind. All the kids were so athletic. Good kids, too. But Jonathan Brooks in high school, ladies and gentlemen, was different. Absolutely different in what he was doing. I'll never forget watching him. And you knew he was going to be a star. You knew he was going to be a star. And he showed everybody this year. He showed everybody what I saw all those years ago, standing on the sidelines of Jerry's World, sitting on the field, watching this young running back go crazy. I'd watched him do it all year. And he goes to Texas and he puts on an absolute show. So first and foremost, prayers go out to the Brooks family. Prayers go out to Jonathan Brooks. I hope that it's a speedy recovery because you, sir, have got an unbelievably bright future in front of you. Whatever he chooses to do, whether that's go to the NFL, whether that's come back another year and continue showcasing why you're one of the most gifted running backs in the game, he's going to be just fine. He's going to excel at whatever he chooses to do because I've watched him since high school. And there are some people that are destined for something. And I truly believe he's one of them. That kid is different, and he's going to come back different. So wherever he chooses to do, whatever he chooses to go do, he will excel at, whether that's prepare for the draft, whether that's refocus on next year. What does this mean for Texas? Well, luckily you have Baxter. Luckily you have some guys. But let's be 100% honest here. Jonathan Brooks had emerged as that guy for a reason, because of his ability. Because of his ability. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Texas pivots off of this because they still have a very loaded running back room. They still have a lot of guys that I really like. Hell, I talked about it after the spring game. Savion Red, bad penalty this past game. I believe the penalty was on him. There's guys, I've watched a lot of football. So if I have that wrong, I sincerely apologize. I believe an untimely penalty occurred on him this game against TCU, if memory serves right. But regardless, I think he's a phenomenally gifted player. That Texas spring game, he stood out like a sore thumb to me. Texas has options at running back. Do they have the option? We're going to find out. Baxter's going to be a dude. Let's get that understood. He's just young. He's just young. Now, that being said, if there was ever a position that I feel better about playing a true freshman, running back is probably one of the ones, right? Where it's just like, okay, you got to know how to block. But if you figure that out, I feel really good. Miles says, Ty, does Bama jump Texas tomorrow? I don't believe they will. And here's why, Miles. Right now, Texas and Bama are the only two teams in college football playoff contention that have more than three ranked wins per the College Football Playoff Committee. It's just Bama and Texas. Bama has the one loss to Texas. Texas, one loss comes to OU. Now, that being said, I think Bama's playing unbelievable football right now. I think Bama is such an improved team. I think they are a vastly different team. Texas still has the heads-up win, and Texas has 3 ranked wins, as does Bama. I think they both should be above Oregon. There is no argument in the universe to have Oregon above either of those teams. But no, I don't think the committee will jump them, just because right now the committee is showing us they value Oregon's win against Utah more than anything Texas and Alabama have done, which is laughable. I love Oregon. I love Dan Lanning. I think that Oregon got something. You want to talk about a young coach that, damn it, they may have got something. Oregon? Yeah, they may have got something. Yeah, I love that. And I'm a big fan of the Ducks. But let's call it what it is, ladies and gentlemen. You play the game for a reason, damn it. You lace up and play the game for a reason. We all have the same record. Bama, Texas, Oregon all have the same record. They don't have the same resume. Not even close to the same resume. Yes, Oregon has been destroying teams. I grant you that. Oregon takes teams out to the woodshed and bonks them over the head with that club multiple times. True. Bama and Texas have been in a bit more, actual fights. But I give a lot of analogies. And I do this for a very purposeful reason. I give analogies, and I've done this since debate, because I want to get people out of the frame of mind in which they currently view things with, and logically give you a scenario that's analogous, that's very comparable, but it's not using the same circumstances. Basically, it's like this. If we're talking about UFC fighters, and you have a UFC fighter that is 2-0 against another one that's 2-0, the one guy that's 2-0 beat CM Punk twice. The other guy that's 2-0, he beat Kamaru Usman and then knocked out Justin Gaethje. You're both 2-0. Sure, those are vastly different 2-0s. Those are world apart 2-0s. World apart 2-0s. You both undefeated. Sure. One of them you've taken out world-class fighters. The other one you've taken out a fighter. Now, CM Punk would whoop my ass. That's neither here nor there. But you get the purpose of this, right? Like, it's you have one loss. Sure, you shouldn't be above Texas or Alabama. That's ridiculous. PI called on when the player just dropped the ball. I didn't actually see that one, Neo. I need to go back and rewatch the entirety of the game. I love the YouTube quad cam, but the only problem with the YouTube quad cam is that, I will miss little sequences. And over the past 2 weeks, I've just been very unfortunate and missed some key little things like that. Boom, Miles, great analogy right here. Boxing, right? Probably a bit easier to, like Tank versus Garcia, both undefeated, both great fighters. Nobody here, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen one person in this chat. Nobody here can find me where I said Oregon isn't one of the best teams in the nation. Oregon's an unbelievable team. They're coached by an unbelievable coach. Bo Nix is playing out of his mind. The defense is unbelievable. It's a great team. Much like this right here. Ryan Garcia is a great boxer. He's a lot of fun. Tank is different. There are levels. Tank is different. Tank fought boxers. That's a great analogy, Miles. I love that. Daryl, lifelong Sooner fan, says, I'm a lifelong Sooner fan. I'm new to that kid getting hurt really sucked. Chin up, Jonathan. Work hard in your rehab and set the world on fire in the pros. God bless. Absolutely, man. That right there is the attitude, man. This is the attitude. You can be a Sooner fan. You can wish Sooners beat Texas every time they play and still keep the game in complete view, Daryl. Love that take. That's a great take. 100%. If Texas keeps winning and Alabama will jump them when they pick the playoff teams. It really depends, I think, JW, on what happens whenever they get to the championships. Because, okay, we're just going to assume, just for this discussion, we're going to assume Texas wins out and Bama wins out. If it depends who Texas plays in that championship game. Because if Texas plays like a 20th ranked team and Bama plays number 2 or number 1 ranked Georgia and gets that win, it'll be real hard not to put Bama in. But it's got to happen. It's got to happen. This is going to be wild. It's going to be wild. Oregon is better than Washington. I agree with you. I do agree with you. I actually do agree that, and this, guys, this is why I know someone said last time, and they were partly right, hey, we're arguing about nothing, just keep winning and this solves itself. But here's the thing. What if Oregon wins against Washington? What if there's a scenario where Texas wins their conference championship, Alabama wins their conference championship, and Oregon wins their conference championship? Now you have 3 teams vying for 2 playoff spots. Who gets it? Who gets it? Well, the committee has already shown they value Oregon more than Texas or Bama. So the logical answer would be Oregon. And then I don't know. But that's why this is going to be wild. Mark says Oregon has beaten just 2 teams with a winning record. Yeah. I like Oregon. I think Oregon's a damn good football team. I think Oregon is a tough out for everybody in the nation. But results are results. Results are results. Why did USC pay all that money for a coach with 0 natties, but OU ends up with a coach with 3? Well, Brent Venables was a defensive coordinator for 3 natties. So he's certainly been a part of national championships. But if we're talking head coach, he's got as many as Lincoln. But I do agree with what you're saying, right? I completely understand the spirit of the comment. Yeah, I don't know, man. Lincoln's a great coach, but it's just Lincoln will always, in my opinion, be exactly where he is. Exactly where he is. It's almost a little bit akin to Jimbo, where it's like you are going to maintain exactly where you are because of your unwillingness to accept few simple truths in the game of football. If they both went out, I think it's like the undefeated Oregon, Washington, then we jump to number 3, Texas, 4 Bama. Yeah, that'd be interesting. I have no idea what they're going to do, Miles. I'm going to be the first to admit it. I have no idea. Because this is the most interesting year. All right, we do need to end this on one final segment, and then we got some videos coming out. We got a video on a major win Alabama got. We got a video coming out on a major win Texas got. Be on the lookout. Both of those coming out today. But final thing, and by the way, guys, live stream tonight, 5:30. If the crew is available, they will be here. You'll get Jay, you'll get PG if they're available. Hopping on, we'll be breaking down all of college football, all of the big news. And that's going to be a lot of fun. But last thing we need to talk about, transfer portal will be jumping. Listen, we talked about this last week, but it is going to be insane, the transfer portal, because whenever we look, especially like Texas A&M, the players have a 30-day window, which ends coincidentally right around the time the other transfer portal window is opening. You get what I mean? So these A&M players, they got a lot of time and opportunity to make decisions. And if you're Texas A&M, that might be scary. But it's not just them. There's about to be a lot of change on the way The transfer portal this year is about to be jumping. Now, there are multiple different issues with this. Issues is a strong word. Allow me to explain. The only issue I have with the transfer portal is what it means for high school recruiting, how it can negatively impact high school recruiting. And for those of you worried about the effect the transfer portal will have on the game of football, I offer you the long-standing idea that has been floated in several different areas, especially here in America, whether that's in economics, whether that's just genuinely in different facets of our culture, that the free market, quote unquote, the free market will correct itself. What I mean when I say that is think of the transfer portal as a pendulum. Okay? So when it didn't exist, you had very little movement. Right? It was just kind of flowing. Whenever they opened it up, someone took it, and now the transfer portal is swinging. I mean, you are seeing massive extreme swings. But what happens if we let this go? It'll start to equalize. It'll start to come together. Much like the free market. Things will begin to equalize. May take some time, but after a while, things will come back to a more stable environment. That is something that I do think people don't take into account. That yes, the transfer portal is massively changing college football. Now it will continue to change it. But I think the market will largely correct itself. I think that less players will be incentivized to enter the transfer portal once they see it doesn't work out as luxuriously as they may have hoped. So that's something we've got to look out for. But this transfer portal is going to be insane. The first window is going to be insane. The second window is going to be insane. And now you have some of the more talented teams in the nation, basically their rosters opening up. Ladies and gentlemen, we have got an insane time in front of us for college football, and it is going to be a lot of fun. As I'm getting out of here, a special thank you to Shady Mile, a thank you to Home Field, both of which work with the channel. Thank you to everybody in here. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit the like button. That really helps out the channel. And by the way, guys, if you're interested and you have the Bleacher Report app, you can catch me on Bleacher Report, I believe, 3 times this week. I'll be on there tomorrow after the college football playoff rankings drop, and we're going to be discussing the college football playoff rankings over on Bleacher Report. You can catch me and Kyle Henderson over there on Thursday, breaking down what Alabama needs to do, not only this weekend, but to get into the committee's graces. Then you can catch me on Bleacher Report on Friday doing our National College Football Pick'em show, where I am healthily in the lead, and I do not plan on looking back. Thank you to everybody being in here. We will be back this evening, 5:30 Central Standard Time, with another live show. Until then, enjoy your day. We'll see you next time. That's it. See you.